The Routiers had it all. A big Texas house, and even bigger dreams. Then someone took it all away. In a savage instant, 2 young boys are murdered.
As we walked into the den, you could see the blood stains on the carpet.
Their mother's throats slashed.
Whoever killed these boys meant to kill Darley.
Who did this?
The hunt for a killer is on. Drops of blood, tiny fibers left behind, mark the killer's trail.
We performed over 100 DNA analysis in this case.
As evidence is found, different theories emerge. Tangled plots are uncovered that tell a tale of greed and betrayal.
Beneath the surface, you had real problems.
I did not murder my kids.
He is a sociopathic and pathological liar.
Will forensic science catch a killer or frame an innocent victim? June 6, 1996. A quiet night in Rowlett, Texas is torn by sirens.
Oh my God! Eugene is going towards 6801 Eagle Drive. The sheriff is on the phone. Hold on. Ma'am, I need you to talk to me. Ma'am, I can't understand you. You're going to have to slow down, calm down, and talk to me. What is going on?
A 911 call brings police to a big house on Eagle Drive.
Stop right there!
Stop my children, my wife.
Don't take another step. Stop right there!
Somebody stop my children!
All right, all right. Show me.
They're gonna get here soon. My boys are dying. Oh my God.
Who did this? Where are they?
They're still out in the garage. I've been caught. Look at what they did to me. If they don't get here soon, they're gonna be dead. My boys are dying.
Devin Routier is 6 years old. His brother Damon, just 5. They've both been savagely stabbed in their sleep. Darley Routier, their mother, is bleeding from a jagged wound on her neck. Detective Jim Patterson headed the investigation.
I received a call from dispatch telling me that there had been a couple of boys stabbed along with their mother. They also explained to me that they had one on the ground. Well, when you tell an officer that you have one on the ground, that to us is they're chasing somebody on foot.
Lieutenant Dave Neighbors was in charge of the crime scene.
You know, you can't help but think about walking into that scene for the first time and seeing Devin laying there on the floor, looking up at the ceiling. You know, that's something that she'll never forget.
Devin is already dead, stabbed twice in the chest, puncturing his heart. His brother Damon, stabbed 6 times through his back, his lung and liver pierced, is still breathing when paramedics arrive. He's rushed to hospital, but is dead on arrival. Initially, Darley's story is very straightforward. She tells police that it was a hot night and that she and her 2 sons were sleeping in the living room to try and escape the heat. Her husband Darren and 8-month-old son were upstairs. Darley tells officers at the scene that, startled from her sleep, she struggled with an intruder, then chased him through the house. A glass shatters to the floor. He drops a bloody knife on the way. And then the man disappears into the garage. Darley's throat has been cut. Her boys have been stabbed. She yells for her husband. Then calls 911. By the time Darren Routier gets to the living room, it's too late.
Hang on.
Bleeding from a savage neck wound, Darley Routier is rushed to the closest major hospital, the Baylor University Medical Center in nearby Dallas.
And at 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call, and it was the nurse across the street. And she blurted out that Devin and Damon were dead and that Darley was dying.
With Darley fighting for her life, investigators start combing the house for clues. The best chance they have to catch the killer is to move fast. Greg Davis was the assistant district attorney for the Rowlett area.
From the very first moment that we walked in the home, it was obvious that the blood evidence would be key in this case.
The carpet is soaked in blood. There are signs of a violent struggle. The trail continues in the kitchen. The murder weapon left behind. A boot print has been preserved in blood. A torn screen is discovered in the garage. A blood-stained sock is found in the alley behind the house. And there are reports that a dark-colored sedan was cruising the area just before the attack. It all paints a picture of a killer on the run. While Darley is in surgery, police begin their search for a brutal killer. Routine police investigation finds that Darley and Darren Routier were high school sweethearts.
I'll get a better sleep down here.
You want me to sleep with you?
No, you go on upstairs. Got an early day
In
tomorrow.
1996, Darren was running a successful business in computer parts.
I love you, sweetie.
Darley did the books. They had 3 children, a big Texas house, and by all accounts, a close relationship.
Oh, you remember to lock the door?
Already checked. Get out.
But on that hot June night in 1996, things would change forever. By 6 a.m., her house is a crime scene. Her 2 oldest sons are dead, and she is badly wounded. Dr. Vincent DeMaio is the chief medical examiner for Bexar County, Texas.
What she had was an incised wound, a cut or a slashing wound of the right side of the neck that went downward towards the left side. And then there was another cut on the front of her left shoulder, which could very well have been a continuation of this. And she also had a very deep stab wound of her right forearm where the blade actually went down to the bone.
When a doctor came in a couple hours later, I remember him holding my hand and telling me that the throat wound came within 1 millimeter of her carotid artery. That's like the thickness of a cigarette paper. And if that would have penetrated that, Darley would be dead.
In the days to come, enormous bruises, stretching from her wrist to her shoulders, would emerge on Darley's arms. They're the injuries of a woman who was fighting for her life. Detective Jim Patterson is the lead investigator on the case. Hours after the attack, he talks to Darley as she recovers in hospital.
I met with Darley about 4 hours after the incident at the house. I met with her at the hospital.
Darley, can you tell me what happened up at the house? Just start at the beginning.
She was alert. She was conscious. She knew exactly what she was saying.
I woke up and I saw someone standing over me with a knife in his hands. We struggled. Then he just walked off through the kitchen into the utility room. I saw him drop the knife and I picked it up. I probably shouldn't have done that. And I put the knife on the kitchen counter. And then I saw Damon standing in the hallway. And Devin was just lying there. And I called 911.
It's a slightly different story than she first gave police. And Darley can only provide sketchy details of her attacker. He wore black clothes, had bushy hair, and a baseball cap. It's all police have to go on.
Quite a mess here. Yeah. This vacuum cleaner's in that position.
Armed with Darley's statement, police search for evidence that corroborates Darley's story of an intruder.
What about this? Now, this knife, that's exactly where I found it when I came in.
Rowlett police call in James Cron, a former member of the Dallas County Sheriff's Department. Cron is now a crime scene consultant who has investigated more than 20,000 crime scenes.
First thing we did in standard step is to do a walkthrough, and that is a very careful walk where you do nothing, touch nothing, but except observe the scene.
They begin their investigation in the blood-soaked family room. What they find is a puzzling collection of clues. If Darley was attacked while she slept on the couch, why is there hardly any blood on the pillow? The couch below isn't ripped or torn. In the kitchen, shards of broken glass litter the floor.
She heard a glass break as the intruder ran through the kitchen. She then followed after the intruder. And yet, when we got there and we looked at it, her bloody footprints are underneath the glass that was supposedly broken before she ever ran through the kitchen. Now, that didn't make any sense.
Even more perplexing, only one bloody boot print is found. But the blood trail ends there. There's no blood at all in the garage. A small collection of Darley's jewelry sits on a counter in the kitchen. If this was a robbery, why wasn't it taken? The clues are even more confusing outside the house, beginning with a bloody sock that is discovered in the alley.
We determined that sock actually came from inside the Routier home. We were able to match some of the fibers on that sock to tennis shoes belonging to Darren.
The blood on Darren Routier's sock is eventually matched to that of the two murdered boys. But how did it get there?
Did you notice any bloody footprint?
Nothing. It was completely unmarked.
And his gate was closed?
That's right. But the hinges are out. It's held together by a wire here.
Cron finds no sign of a frantic getaway. If the intruder left through the garage and the bloody sock is in the alley, Cron should be able to find evidence that the intruder came through here, but he can't.
Began in about 30 minutes, and the Raleigh police did too, that we felt like there was no intruder.
So we had to focus on who was in the house, okay? Well, it's obvious that the infant didn't kill his brothers and stab his mother, so then you have to look at the husband.
Darren, I know it's been a horrible night.
Yeah. You know, I really love Darley. She is so beautiful, don't you think?
Darren comes up to me, and this is the first thing he says. He talks about how big his wife's breasts are. He talks about how pretty his wife is. He talks about that this is the biggest thing that's ever happened in the city of Rowlett. He doesn't ask me about his children. So I just found his actions to be a little strange.
So beautiful, you know.
It leads Patterson to another horrifying theory. Perhaps Darren Routier himself had murdered his own children. Within days of the murder of their two children, both Darren and Darley Routier are brought to the Rowlett police station. It takes them more than an hour to fill out voluntary statements about what happened the night of the murders. Darren repeats the version of events he told police at the scene, that he was asleep when he heard Darley screaming for help. He rushed downstairs, but was too late to save his children. Darley's story, though, starts to change.
The next thing I wake up and I feel pressure on me. I felt Damon press on my right shoulder and I heard him cry. This made me really come awake and realize that
there was a man standing down at my feet, walking away from me. Walked after him. Heard glass breaking. Ran, turned on the light. I ran back towards the utility room, realized that there was a big white-handled knife laying on the floor. It was then I realized I had blood all over me, and I grabbed the knife, thinking he was in the...
I ran back through the kitchen and realized that the entire living room had blood all over it, everything. I put the knife back on the counter and I ran to the entrance, turned on the light, and I started screaming for Darren.
It's the most detailed description yet of what happened, and it's not the same story she told Patterson at the hospital.
We understand that people are going to change some of their stories. It might have been a black car instead of a blue car, that kind of stuff, but you don't change the whole dynamics of it, and that's what she did.
In Darley's new version, there is no struggle with the intruder. Darley's youngest boy was awake and standing by her shoulder. There are important differences which make investigators take a very close look at the crime scene. Evidence from the Routier house is starting to pour in.
There, see, that's like underneath there.
We held the scene for 13 days. We actively processed it for 11 days. So we were very thorough. If there was a book, we flipped through every page. If there was a picture, it came off the wall.
They analyzed everything they could possibly analyze. They fingerprinted the entire house. They took the carpet. They took the kitchen sink. We performed over 100 DNA analysis in this case.
If there was a struggle between Darley and her intruder, as she first told officers, there should be long, thin lines of blood along the ground and the walls. These splatters would have been thrown off as a bleeding Darley fought with the intruder. But investigators can't find any such blood splatters. If Darley had chased her attacker through the house when she was wounded, she would have left long, thin streaks of blood behind. Blood falling from a moving object, such as someone running, leaves an elongated mark, not a round blood stain. Investigators can't find any of these marks either. In the utility room, where Darley says the killer threw the knife down, there is blood. But that, too, doesn't look like it should.
What we did after the knife had been processed for latent prints and DNA evidence is we got the original knife, brought it back to the house, and got 2 units of blood. We put blood on the knife, we used the same floor, and we dropped the knife from different heights to see what type of blood patterns that would leave on it.
And we found that we saw a very distinct V-shaped pattern each and every time that we dropped the knife in the utility room, and there was no pattern like that when we first got there. And again, that was very disheartening. It was discouraging because, again, it pointed toward Miss Routier.
Investigators also recreate her movements throughout the house.
She indicated to us that she ran through the crime scene, and so we laid out some butcher paper and inked up her feet and had her walk. And we also re-inked her and had her run, 20 feet on the butcher paper to see what her stride was and measured that. And we were able to look at those footprints in the kitchen, and it was telling us that she walked through the kitchen. She wasn't running through the kitchen.
Investigators are also interested that Darley's feet have no scratches or cuts. If the intruder had knocked the wine glass on the floor, why hadn't Darley stepped on any of the broken glass? An innocent explanation is also found for the only other footprint in the house.
The only bloody shoe print in the kitchen leading to the utility room belonged to one of the first responders.
What we do is that we make sure that we have prints of everyone's shoes to match up to the prints or the physical evidence on the floor or any place else that we can.
Most damning of all is the evidence of blood found on the countertop and the sink. Even when blood is cleaned up, an invisible residue often remains behind. But when treated with a chemical called luminol, the blood trails begin to glow under ultraviolet light.
So we blacked out the house, covered the windows, and sprayed the sink area and took a photograph of that. That reacted positive for blood and indicated to us that there had been a cleanup there by the sink.
Self-inflicted, yes.
Patterson is growing more and more convinced that after stabbing her own children, Darley Routier stabbed herself to make it look like she was attacked. Patterson gets a second opinion of Darley's injuries from one of the doctors who worked at the hospital.
So what do you think?
Yes, she could have done it herself.
So you're saying that Darley stabbed herself?
I'm saying that these wounds could have been self-inflicted, yes.
One last tiny piece of evidence helps the Rowlett police make up their mind. What becomes known as knife number 4 is found in the Routier kitchen. It has a tiny fiber clinging to it, a fiber which matches the screen that was cut in the garage. The only way it could get there was if someone inside the house took it, cut the screen, then put it back in the block. Based on the evidence, the police can come to only one conclusion. Darley Routier murdered her own children. It's a chilling thought, but the big question now is, why? Sunday, June 9th, 1996. 3 days after their murder, a funeral is held for Devon and Damon Routier. More than 400 people turn out. But the suspicions of the police are growing. They can't find any traces of an intruder in or around the house.
I instinctively wanted someone else to be there. I wanted an intruder to have broken into that house because the last thing that I wanted to believe was that a mother would actually kill her 2 children.
But the evidence was piling up. The question now was why? What could have driven Darley Routier to commit such a shocking crime? As police learn more, they discover that the Routiers were having problems.
The Routiers wanted to paint themselves as the typical all-American family, and yet beneath the surface, you saw difficulties. So you had a very thin veneer of normalcy out there, but beneath the surface, you had real problems.
The evening of the murders, the talk wasn't just sweet goodnights.
You gonna be comfortable down here?
Yeah, I'll be fine. Darren, we have to talk.
About what?
It's about everything. When are you gonna get your car fixed so that I can have mine? I mean, we can't go anywhere. I just feel like I'm trapped in this house.
Keep your voice down. I don't want to wake the boys. It's gonna cost us $800 to get that car fixed, and I'm gonna sell the boat because it's not working out the way I thought it would.
I'll just get my car. Did you remember to lock the door?
Already, sure. Good night.
The couple was financially strapped and they owed more than $10,000 in back taxes to the IRS. During her pregnancy with her third child, Darley had been depressed, staying in her room for days, even weeks at a time. A diary found in their house confirms that Darley had struggled with depression after the baby was born. A month before the murders, Darley had written,
Devin, Damon, Drake, I hope one day you will forgive me for what I'm about to do. I just can't find the strength to keep fighting anymore.
Is this a damaging portrait of a suicidal woman under severe stress, or a mother about to commit murder? And then comes one of the strangest moments of all. June 14th, 8 days after the murders, Devin Routier would have turned 7. The family decides to hold a long-planned birthday party for the young boy at his grave. For 2 hours, it's a somber service. But the most telling moment comes near the end. Prompted by her sister, Darley sprays a can of silly string over the grave of her 2 boys.
Happy birthday, dear Devin. Happy birthday to you.
I think we saw the real Darley Routier at that gravesite party. You know, and I kept thinking as I saw that, I'm a parent. If my child had died a week earlier, would I be in any condition to even talk about it? And yet, here's a mother sitting out there singing, spraying silly string, giving interviews without any sort of emotion. It was bizarre. It was despicable. It really made my stomach turn as I watched her there at that gravesite.
Darley's mother has a very different view of the incident.
That just is a pure example of how you are when you're in grief, because you're crazy when you're in that kind of trauma. You don't believe they're dead one minute, and the next minute, you know, you might be laughing, and the next you might be, you know, just crying your eyes out. But this is just something simple, but it made Darley look bad by the way they slowed down her chewing the gum and smiling and spraying silly string as if she didn't care, where the whole purpose of that was, it was to do it in their honor, and it was something that they would have loved.
After the graveside ceremony, Patterson decides to question Darley again. He brings her to the Rowlett police station one last time.
I'm good. Nice to meet you, sir.
Bill Parker has been doing interrogations for 20 years.
How are you, Darley?
Patterson hopes he'll finally be able to get Darley to confess.
I have a copy of your voluntary statement here. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, that is exactly what happened.
Darley, I have a couple of questions about this statement. You were saying
For 3 hours, Parker grills Darley about the facts of the case.
Before, to be honest with you, I think this is a whole...
6 times he accuses her directly of killing her children.
I think you killed Damon and Devin.
5 times she responds,
Well, if I did it, I don't remember.
but there's no confession.
In all my years, I have never heard anything that unusual. Here's a woman, a stranger, accusing you of killing your children, and your response is, if I did it, I don't remember?
Even without a confession, Patterson is convinced his case is solid. He arrests Darley Routier for the murder of her 2 sons.
You're under arrest for the murder of your 2 boys.
Yeah, I think when we look at her mugshot, we see that pained expression. I don't think it's any pain for those 2 children. I think it's the pain of, you know what, they're actually going to charge me with this offense, and I'm not going to get away with it.
At approximately 10:20 p.m. this evening, investigators from the Rowlett Police Department arrested Darley Routier, white female, age 26. I cannot comment on the details of this investigation other than to say we believe that the white male suspect described by Darley Routier as the man that attacked her and murdered her children never existed.
Darley's family is bewildered.
I saw her arrested on TV at 10 o'clock news. You know, after she went up there for I don't know how many visits with the police, her and Darren went up and you know, they gave him everything. I mean, anything they asked for.
The journey from innocent victim to accused murderer takes just 12 days. Darley Routier is now Texas prisoner 010470. January 6th, 1997, 7 months after the death of Devin and Damon Routier, their mother Darley goes on trial for their murder. Greg Davis is the lead prosecutor for the state of Texas.
In Texas, if you kill a child younger than 6 years of age, you've committed a capital murder. That's what we alleged in this case. That's why Darley was charged with capital murder.
For that reason, Darley is only on trial for the murder of Damon Routier, who was 5 when he was killed. If convicted, the state wants Darley put to death. Her family is outraged and confused.
What did you say for them to think that you had anything to do with this? She goes, I don't know, Mom.
The Darley Routier case was a very challenging case. Depended on a number of pieces of evidence. And it was challenging from the standpoint that we're going to try to convince a jury that a mother would actually kill her 2 children in cold blood.
The case turns on the forensic evidence gathered at the crime scene. The lack of an impact bloodstain in the utility room where the knife was dropped. The lack of evidence of any intruder outside the house. Another damaging forensic test is entered into evidence. Blood from one of the boys is found on the back of Darley's nightshirt. A Texas expert on bloodstains recreates the movements Darley would have made if she had stabbed her children. Blood from the knife falls on the shirt as the knife is raised for each blow. The trail of blood he recreates matches the trail on Darley's shirt.
That evidence on her nightshirt was very convincing. It was very conclusive. There was no other reasonable explanation as to how the blood of Damon and Devin could possibly be up on her nightshirt.
Finally, the jury is shown footage of the graveside party for Devin. While the ceremony was 2 hours long, the jury is only shown the infamous silly string section.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Devin. Happy birthday to you. I love you, Devin and Damon.
Davis tells the jury that Darley staged the entire scene. While her children sleep, Darley takes a knife from the kitchen and slices the screen open. She then takes another knife from the kitchen and kills her 2 sons. She takes one of her husband's socks and makes sure it has blood on it. The sock is then dropped in the alley. She cuts her own neck and in a frenzy beats her arms and wrists. She makes it look like a killer has fled. Then calls for help. Darley's defense focuses on the wound to Darley's neck. Vincent DeMaio, a seasoned medical examiner, takes the stand.
One of the things I asked was, is she right-handed or left-handed? And she's right-handed. If she inflicted this wound, she would have had to have used her left hand. And then she would have had to have stabbed herself deeply in the right forearm. When you consider the injuries by themselves, the injuries have more of the appearance of somebody who has been attacked than someone who has self-inflicted the wounds.
As for the blood on Darley's nightshirt, the defense has another theory.
It could be cast off from gloves that the EMS had, or it could be from the knife that she was attacked with, because if that knife was used to kill the children, their blood would be on it.
Like others, Demaya believes that Darley was awake when she was attacked, but the violence of the attack and the shock of seeing her boys dead has scarred her memory. And a very different picture is painted of Darley as a mother.
Come on, give me some popcorn for your brother. Oh, yeah. Perfect. Do you want to drink that?
She loved those boys. And you know, the prosecutor, Mr. Davis, said that Darley just got tired and they interfered with her lifestyle, so she killed them. Why would she kill the two older boys and not the baby, who would be the most burdensome? I absolutely know that Darley's innocent.
In just 5 weeks, the trial is over. The fate of Darley Routier is in the hands of the jurors. It takes them less than a day to decide Darley's fate.
I'll never forget the jury wanting the pictures of those two children placed out there as they came back to return their verdict. And they wanted those two pictures there so that Darley Routier would have to see those two pictures, because throughout this trial, Darley attempted to make herself the victim. And I always felt it was important to remind that jury and to remind the public that there were two real victims here, two young boys. And I was really heartened by the fact that jury got it. I mean, they understood who the victims were, and they wanted Darley Routier to remember that and to recognize that too. And that was really a defining moment for me.
When the jury was deliberating, I really thought that she would be found either innocent or a hung jury. And when they came in and said that they found her guilty, I absolutely just went crazy. That was the worst part.
Darley Routier is found guilty of murdering her youngest son, Damon. She is sentenced to die by lethal injection. But almost as soon as the verdict is handed down, serious questions begin to surface about the trial and the science behind her conviction. In 1997, the state of Texas put 37 people to death. After her conviction in January, Darley Routier took her place on the state's death row. In Texas, every case that ends in a death penalty is automatically appealed. Stephen Cooper becomes Darley's lawyer.
The police did little to no investigation of any intruder. Their sworn testimony was that within minutes, virtually, of arriving on the scene, that despite all of Darley's massive injuries, they concluded she was the perpetrator.
Cooper hires a private investigator to re-examine the evidence. He pores over everything: police reports, eyewitness accounts, expert testimony. The PI quickly uncovers suspicions pointing towards the man police suspected at the beginning, Darren Routier, Darley's husband.
We do have evidence now that Darren Routier was actively seeking someone to come into the home to do a inside job burglary for insurance purposes.
In a sworn affidavit to Cooper, Darren admits to looking for someone to break into his house.
And so at 3 o'clock in the morning or 2:30, they sneak into this nice-looking house thinking they're gonna, make a successful burglary. And they creep in, and there in the living room, they stumble across human beings who are not upstairs in bed where they should be at 2:30 in the morning.
A get-rich-quick scheme ends in murder. Members of Darren Routier's family asked Texas millionaire Brian Pardo to get involved. A self-proclaimed advocate for the wrongly convicted, Pardo launches an independent investigation that costs as much as $120,000.
I agree that nobody came into the house. I agree that there was an appearance to make it look like somebody came into the house through the screen and used the bread knife for that purpose. So the police were right in taking a hard look at the family. We agreed with that. We just didn't feel they took a very hard look at Darren.
As part of Pardo's investigation, Darren Routier agrees to take a lie detector test about the night of the murders. The results are a bombshell.
Are you Darren Routier?
Yes.
Were you involved in a plot to commit a crime in your home on June 6, 1996?
No.
Did you yourself stab Darlene Routier on June 6, 1996?
No.
Do you know exactly who left the sock in the alley?
No.
Can you name the person who stabbed your sons?
No.
It's a short test, just 4 questions. But the examiner says the results show that Darren was lying when he answered each one of the questions.
Darren failed the test 3 times. And he failed it so utterly that the examiner, who was connected with the Waco PD, actually went around, sat in front of him, and tried to extract a confession from him.
You know, I really would have liked to see you pass. But I don't believe it for a minute.
I came here to pass.
No. You came here because you lied to people all your life and gotten away with it.
I did not lie.
And in the short run, you've got to live with the knowledge you've gotten away with murder. But in the long run, it'll catch up with you.
I did not murder my kids.
Darren maintains his innocence in the crime, but Pardo is deeply suspicious.
Darren, our assessment of him was that he is a sociopathic and pathological liar.
Darren Routier calls the lie detector test a setup, and lie detector results are not admissible in court. But in an affidavit, Darren admits for the very first time that on the night of the murders, Darley had asked for a separation.
2 times prior to this, Darren became violent when she said that she was considering leaving him. The first time, he pointed a loaded pistol at his head, according to Darley, and got her hysterical and threatened to kill himself.
Do what? What don't you want me to do? Don't pursue.
The second time, she said he pointed a gun at her and threatened to kill her.
You're gonna leave me, darling? Is that what you're gonna do? Is that what you're gonna do?
The new evidence creates yet another theory about what happened in the Routier's home the night that Devon and Damon were killed.
You sure you'll be comfortable down here?
Yeah, I'll be fine. Darren, we need to talk.
About what?
I want a separation.
Let's talk about this in the morning. I'm too tired for this.
I'm serious.
I know.
Brian Pardo is convinced that it wasn't an intruder at all who killed the 2 Routier children, and it wasn't their mother either.
Did you remember to lock the door?
I already checked. Good night.
Each of the children had just $5,000 in life insurance. Darley's life was insured for $200,000. For Pardo, that is the motive for the attack.
It was Darren that was applying the stress. It was Darren who had the financial problems. And Darren was the one who needed the money. And so Darren had a huge motive for doing this. Not the least of which was he was not going to let his wife leave him.
Pardo believes that, with the help of an accomplice, Darren attacked Darley first. The bruises on Darley's arms were caused by the struggle.
Of course, there was a lot of screaming going on, a lot of noise. The boys woke up. The boys saw the attack. I think that instinctively the attackers realized that the boys had to be killed as well. Darley, I think, was pounded into submission, was unconscious. I think the attackers thought that she was dead.
Pardo is convinced that a closer study will prove that Darley Routier is innocent of the murder of her 2 boys. June 2005. Darley Routier's lawyer, Stephen Cooper, still believes forensics will clear his client. One of the best chances she has for the appeal is a tiny, smudged fingerprint. Cooper has a possible motive pointing to someone else committing the murders of Devin and Damon Routier. What he doesn't have is any proof that someone else was in the house. That's about to change. When investigators examined the Routiers' house, all fingerprints they found were conclusively identified. However, one print found on the glass tabletop was considered too incomplete to match to anyone.
There was a smudged print that was located on this glass tabletop. There was not anything that we could find that made us believe that that one smudged print belonged to someone different. You know, it could still belong to Darley. It could still belong to Darren. I believe that it's small enough it could, you know, even belong to one of the children. But that's something the defense is looking at because we don't have an answer for it.
While it couldn't be used for identification, during Darley's trial, experts for the state testified that it was consistent with that made by a 5- or 6-year-old child. Even though Patterson thinks the print isn't clear enough to be useful, Stephen Cooper finds an expert who disagrees.
Robert Lonis is a retired New York City Police Department identification expert. He's identified 7 or 8 points for comparison purposes, which is enough, in his opinion, to be run through the APHIS Federal National Fingerprint Database. And the state won't allow us access.
Cooper wants to rule out the possibility that one of the 2 murdered boys could have left the print. There is only one problem.
Unbelievably, and again against standard protocol, neither one of the boys were fingerprinted at the medical examiner's office. That again is just unheard of.
To rule out that the fingerprint was made by either boy, Cooper takes an extreme step. The bodies of both Devin and Damon are exhumed. It's a dramatic move that is ultimately a dead end.
Unfortunately, they were buried in the same casket with their hands clasped together. And again, although they were not supposed to, the caskets had leaked, and the moisture had, and the contact between the fingers had destroyed some of the skin, and we weren't able to recover all the fingerprints.
While the fingerprints are gone, Cooper wants to re-examine the small fiber that was found on the knife in the kitchen. He has serious doubts that it was actually used to cut the screen in the garage.
This is a segment of fiber that is 1/10 the width of a Caucasian human hair. It is microscopic, to say the least. They did not do any scientific testing analysis of its chemical makeup, which was possible.
There are other pieces of evidence Cooper would love to retest, including the actual fingerprint on the glass table, which may contain skin cells. But he has yet to get the courts to give him access. A new witness has come forward. She claims to have seen 2 men near the Routier house about 2 a.m. the night of the murders. One who matched the description Darley gave to the police. Cooper also believes the crime scene was badly contaminated by the police.
The vacuum cleaner was not knocked over by Darley as part of staging the crime scene. It was moved by the police. And in a new trial, I have an expert who'll testify about that.
You get an overzealous prosecutor, you get a bunch of rookie police officers that had no idea how to even take fingerprints. You get people that are in shock, running in and out through glass and blood and, you know, touching things and moving things.
But to date, all of Darley's appeals have been turned down. The court has not granted her request to retest the forensic evidence, and no new trial has been announced.
to say that it was a conspiracy or that anything was mishandled and she's wrongfully accused is not true. She wouldn't be where she is today if she hadn't killed those children.
If we were to do it again today, I'd ask for the same punishment because those two boys deserved that type of justice. She's a dangerous, manipulative individual who's shown absolutely no remorse for her actions, and she deserves the death penalty in this particular case.
Forensics may yet clear Darley Routier. Smeared fingerprints may confirm that someone else was in the house the night her sons were murdered. For now, a story that began with a terrified 911 call has ended on death row. A barbaric murder takes place in a schoolyard.
This is a brutal crime. The violence to the body was horrific.
Strange marks cover the victim's body, indications of a savage attack. Detectives try to find the killer. Fingerprints, teeth, even concrete are all painstakingly analyzed for clues. As the evidence unravels, it leads detectives into a maze of suspects and theories.
I hit her. Then what happened? Didn't move. We were left an uneasy feeling about his confession.
The pressure is on the forensic team to find the truth. Because in this strange case, a confession is not enough. "6 a.m., May 20th, 1990. Behind Grant Park High School in Winnipeg, Manitoba, a horrific crime is discovered. Shortly after the body is found, two forensic officers, Don Boulay and Carrie Armit, arrive at the crime scene. They too are shocked by what they find. Carrie Armit was responsible for gathering the forensic evidence at the crime scene.
It wasn't a simple stab and shooting. The body had sustained a number of serious injuries.
The victim is a middle-aged woman. It appears she was assaulted before she was killed. Her shirt has been pulled up over her head and her purse strap is wound around her neck. Forensic officer Don Boulay, Armit's partner in the identification unit, was responsible for photographing the crime scene.
The victim was naked from the upper body down. The only thing she had on her lower body was her stockings. So it would appear that there's something of a sexual nature that had happened there as well.
The savagery of the attack and the state of the victim's body convinces police that they are dealing with a vicious psychopath. The victim's head has been crushed beyond recognition with a 55-pound piece of concrete. Who would do such a thing, and why? The attack was so violent, blood had spattered up to 20 feet away from the body.
Whoever was present when the violence occurred to the body would have received more blood spray and tissue matter on.
The officers find a pair of black dress shoes and one white canvas slip-on. They are all the same size. While Officer Armit searches for clues, his partner, Don Boulay, makes a detailed record of the crime scene. The contents of the victim's purse litter the area. Might robbery have been a motive for the assault? The area around the body is covered with footprints. Could there have been more than one assailant?
The crime scene was a mess. It's outside, and in the middle of the schoolyard, there were also footprints, tire impressions, there were cigarette butts, and so on.
I remember As I'm photographing the scene, and in fact, I may have made comment to one of the other officers there that for all we know, this guy could be watching us because there are several apartment blocks in the area. And it was just an odd feeling at that time.
Some 200 feet away from the crime scene, there's an open parking lot. Scouring the area for any clues that might shed light on the murder, Officer Armit finds a grocery list and a $5 bill.
Money generally doesn't appear everywhere in school parking lots, in my experience. It is possible that it may have been blown some distance. Of course, at that point in the investigation, we don't know what may or may not be relevant to it.
The most relevant and vital clue they discover is the victim's identity. Her name is Shirley Andranowicz. She is a 42-year-old housewife married with children. Her home is only a few blocks away in a quiet suburban neighborhood. What was she doing out here in the middle of the night? May has been a dry month and the ground is hard. But the blows to Shirley's head are so violent that a 2-inch depression remains when her body is taken away.
The community was horrified seeing that this woman was an average, I would call her a middle-aged, middle-class woman, brutalized and murdered on a school grounds.
While the forensic team comb the crime scene for clues, homicide detectives try to piece together what happened and identify potential suspects. Detective Sergeant Bob Marshall led the homicide investigation.
This was a particularly difficult case. We had an outdoor scene, which is always difficult, never mind one that's frequented by thousands of people on any given day. In addition to that, it was a crime that captured the attention of the city, in particular the neighborhood where it happened, just by the horrific nature of it.
The first 48 hours of a murder investigation are the most crucial to picking up a vital lead. Detective Ron Oliver was Marshall's partner in the homicide investigation.
It's all an interview process. There's a lot of legwork involved. Our entire squad would have been working on interviewing numerous people who would have either known, had knowledge of that particular evening.
85% of murders are committed by someone known to the victim.
Hi. Is your dad home?
Dad?
The police must now interview everyone who knew Shirley.
Police are here!
They start with her family.
Yeah? Mr. Andranowicz.
Yeah? What's up?
I'd like to talk to you, sir. Do you have a minute?
Yeah? You know, it's a good thing you're here. My wife didn't come home last night.
Could we come in, please?
Yeah, sure.
Ed and Shirley Andranowicz had been married for 19 years. They had 3 daughters. Ed told the police that he and his wife had gone for drinks the night before at the Grant Hotel.
We went to the Grant around 8 o'clock.
You remember who was there?
Randy Sloan, Ron Sutherland, Rick St. Germain, they were all there.
Hey, with the music, eh?
The Grant is near Ed and Shirley's home. They are regulars here. Shirley likes dancing and flirting. Ed tells police he'd been drinking long before they went out that night.
I'm tired, let's go.
I'm not tired. You go.
So let's go.
Listen, I'm not going anywhere. I'm having fun.
Ed leaves, angry and alone. Now police can only hope that somewhere in this bar, they'll find a clue to the murder of Shirley Andranowicz.
Oops.
Does anyone in the bar know anything about what happened later that night? Do they know who might have killed her? Could the murderer be amongst the drinkers who were watching her that night? What the police discover will shock and surprise the whole community. Early on Sunday morning, behind Grant Park High School in Winnipeg, Manitoba, the mutilated body of Shirley Andranowicz is found. Detectives investigating the murder try to find out everything they can about her, especially what happened during her last hours. How did she end up at the school when it's in the opposite direction to the bar? Did someone take her there?
Oh, we absolutely felt it was likely somebody from the bar or one of her associates, just based on her lifestyle, but we came up with nothing whatsoever.
Shirley's body is taken to St. Boniface Hospital, where a post-mortem reveals even more disturbing evidence. The autopsy is conducted by Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Peter Markestein. As the police suspected, Shirley was violently raped, but the attacker didn't stop there.
On the abdomen, what appears to be a pattern, like a running shoe.
Dr. Markestein finds some alarming marks on Shirley's body.
What appears to be bite marks. Human bite marks. On the upper arm, the breasts, and the genitals.
When we examined the body and when we looked at the nipples, it was obvious that they had been bitten off.
The nipples were bitten off, bite marks were left on the body. There was extreme violence that was evident on the body. A piece of concrete curbing had been smashed into her face, basically obliterating her face. Pants had been pulled down. It had all the earmarks of a vicious sexual attack.
Dr. Markestein takes swabs of any saliva residue left around the bite marks. These are then sent to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Laboratory for testing. Together with the actual bite marks, the saliva may help identify the killer.
If there is presence of saliva, in those days, what we did, now we would do DNA. In those days, we determined if the person were a secretor, that is, if they were to secrete their blood groups into their body fluids, it would be possible to match that with the accused or with the assailant.
Severe bruising around the victim's neck, consistent with the first strap found around the victim's neck.
It's hard to determine whether Shirley Andranowicz died from strangulation or from the repeated blows with a heavy object which crushed her skull.
The sequence, of course, is more likely that strangulation took place before the head was destroyed, but I cannot say whether she was dead or not. She probably was unconscious. The destruction of the head was overwhelming, and we reached the conclusion that that was the cause of death in this particular case.
The victim's blood and hair found on the heavy piece of concrete by the body confirms that this is the murder weapon. Now the forensic team must find out if the concrete holds any clues to the killer's identity. The murder weapon is given to forensic geologist Richard Monroe.
Getting fingerprints from a surface can be extremely difficult or extremely easy depending on the medium. Every type of surface will react differently to the chemistry that's contained within the oils in your hands. If you're touching glass, you have a smooth surface, and your fingerprints will sit on that surface. It'll give you a nice, consistent pattern. When you're dealing with a porous medium like a piece of concrete, the surface is actually very bumpy and it will absorb oils.
Looked at microscopically, concrete resembles a series of sharp ridges. Any oils left by a finger would be balancing precariously on top of these points. In 1990, no one had yet been able to get fingerprints off concrete.
The concept at the time was it was virtually impossible to get fingerprints on a porous medium. The technology didn't exist to be able to do that.
A substance had to be found that would fix the fingerprint oils to the concrete ridges so they could then be treated with chemicals to make them stand out and become visible. Meanwhile, police try to piece together what happened during the last hours of Shirley's life. They round up the man she was dancing with, Randy Sloan, and his friends Richard St. Germain and Ron Sutherland. Detectives Bob Marshall and Ron Oliver interview them and everyone else they can find who was at the bar that night.
We were having a good time. She was warming up. I told her my wife was at a hen party. Her old man was passed out at home. I said, why not come to my house, watch a movie, have a few beers?
We were just dancing, But Randy, I told him he's off, because she was married.
Randy told him to get lost. Ron said, again, I'll break your arm. So I said, Ron, just go sit back down.
So about 11 o'clock, I figured I had enough, and I asked Shirley if she wanted to come home with me. She said no. Too bad, she's here today.
I have no idea when I left, but I went home alone.
I just kept drinking, so I don't really remember too well what happened after that.
Each of the men claim they left the bar alone. None of them have any idea who might have killed Shirley. After interviewing all the witnesses they can dig up, the detectives can find no one who saw Shirley leave the bar that night. 2 days after the murder, police ask Ed Andranowicz to come up and tie up some loose ends. Robbery still figures as a possible motive for the attack.
There's a number of unanswered questions. For example, she wasn't wearing wedding rings, so did she have them? Were they missing? Her purse had been gone through, so no sign of credit cards. Did she have any?
No, we don't have no credit cards. Who needs the day?
Marshall then shows Ed the grocery list they found in the parking lot near the crime scene. It includes cat food and litter. The Andronowiczes only have pet fish.
That's not her writing.
As the detectives wrap up the interview, Marshall suddenly asks the question that turns the investigation upside down.
So do you have any idea who might have killed your wife?
I might have.
What do you mean you might have?
I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Are you saying that you might have killed your wife?
It's possible.
And before we go any further, we want you to understand that you could be charged with murder.
I know.
So what makes you think that you killed your wife?
I hit her. Shirley came home from the bar. It was late. After midnight, and we got into a fight. A bad one. Where have you been? Come on. Let's go to bed.
I'm sleeping on the couch.
Where you been with, you dirty slut?
Please, just
I swear.
Oh, yeah. Come on, try. Hit me. Sick.
She hit me. She dared me to hit her back. I hit her. She fell.
Then what happened?
She didn't move.
So what did you do?
I guess I put her into the car.
What do you mean you guess?
I did. She was unconscious.
Why?
I thought she was dead.
Where did you take her?
I guess I took her to school. I remember a field, bleachers.
Then what happened?
I don't know.
Why can't you remember?
I'd been drinking. Lots.
So what did you do?
I'm not sure. I might have hit her. With what? A board?
Did you bite her, Ed?
I might have.
Ed, we don't want you admitting to something you didn't do. Are you sure you killed your wife?
Yes. I did.
Ed's confession gives detectives their first definite suspect, but it raises more questions than it answers.
We were uneasy with the confession by virtue of the fact that there was nothing to corroborate it, that we could find anyways. So we didn't charge him initially with the offense. We thought, well, we'll hold him for investigative purposes.
The police must now prove whether Ed killed his wife or not. If they get it wrong, they will lose any advantage they have, and the murderer could strike again. The next day, detectives talk to Ed's daughter. She tells them that the day after the murder, her father gave her a bag of dirty clothes to wash.
They had this smell to them. I don't know what kind of smell, okay? It's hard to describe. There were these dark stains. Like blood. I don't know. I got scared, and I don't want to think he did it.
She also tells police that her parents had regular fights.
Anger.
Sleeping on the couch.
She would slap him and then pull his hair, and he never fought back. They they had separate rooms. I don't want to believe he did it. Maybe, when you've got all that anger and frustration built up inside you, it just explodes.
The detective sees some of Ed's and Shirley's shoes. One of them matches the white canvas slip-on found at the crime scene.
On the abdomen, what appears.
But none of them match the print left on Shirley's body. If Ed is the killer, whose shoe left that mark? Police have Ed's confession and his daughter's potentially damaging testimony. They now take a blood sample to compare to the blood type found in the saliva on Shirley's bite marks. The results could seal Ed's fate. Forensic officers, meanwhile, continue their painstaking search for any evidence that might support Ed's confession. They measure the tire tracks found at the crime scene and compare them to those of Ed's car. They are similar but inconclusive. The inside of Ed's car is examined too. If he did use it to take Shirley to the school, there should be some evidence left inside it. In the trunk, they find a windshield wiper pushed deep into the liner. The blade is badly damaged. The piece of concrete used to kill Shirley Andranowicz also had a black mark on it, like the shape of a wiper blade. Did Ed have the murder weapon in the trunk of his car? Many small pieces of concrete were also found, which isn't unusual given that Ed works in construction. But could they be from the block that killed Shirley? They are sent to forensic geologist Richard Monroe for analysis.
There were several pieces in that trunk, and we tried to go over the whole block on either side to see if there was actually a physical match. There was a lot of time invested trying to put that block in the vehicle.
Monroe even goes so far as to visit the crime scene.
Part of doing an investigation is understanding what you're looking at totally. You don't just zero in on one small aspect. You have to take a look at the whole picture, see what a potential witness might see, what a witness might hear, noise of a bus going by, or whatever it might be.
Monroe then notices the parking lot a couple of 100 feet away. Taking a closer look, he makes a crucial discovery.
I looked at the pieces of the parking lot and I saw some obvious comparatives with the parking lot abutment that was used as a murder weapon, the way the block was broken at the time, that couldn't be a fit.
The murder weapon did not come from Ed's car. It had been at the crime scene all along. Having found where the murder weapon came from, Monroe gets the company that manufactured it to make him an exact replica. He cuts that into small sections so he can conduct a variety of experiments to try to read fingerprints on concrete. Inventing a new science is a long, meticulous process.
There wasn't a day I didn't work on it, and it was pretty intense, 18, 20 hours a day sometimes just to be able to get through it.
If Ed's fingerprints are found on the concrete block, he faces life in prison for the murder of his wife. His future could now depend on Monroe doing something no one has yet been able to do. Shirley Andranowicz, a middle-aged mother of 3, was brutally raped and murdered behind this suburban school in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Her husband, Ed, has confessed to the crime. Though police have their doubts, forensic investigators searched for clues that will support his confession. Officer Kerry Armit discovers 2 fingerprints on the grocery list he found in the parking lot near the crime scene.
We can see the 2 areas on the back of the grocery note where these fingerprints were developed. We thought they may be identifiable if we had a suspect ink impressions to use in comparison, so they were compared to any suspects. Really.
The prints are clear enough to establish that they don't belong to Ed or to his murdered wife, Shirley. Perhaps this harmless list has nothing to do with the case after all. The forensic investigators leave no avenue unexplored. Anything the killer touched could help to identify him, even the bite marks he left on Shirley's body. An impression of Ed's bite is made in wax so it can be analyzed. Dr. David Sweet is the director of the Bureau of Legal Dentistry at the University of British Columbia.
There are a variety of crucial questions that can be answered in criminal investigations, and they are centered around dental evidence. In the case of a bite mark, if you identify the bite mark, you're able to conclude who created that bite mark, and that becomes a very important issue for the police.
Dr. Sweet traces the wax impressions of Ed's bite onto a piece of acetate. He then superimposes that on a life-size photograph of one of Shirley's bite marks. This method allows him to move the position of the teeth around so as to compare them to the marks on the skin.
When I did this comparison, I didn't see the type of match that I thought would be there if in fact, these teeth caused the bite mark. I was able to conclude that this suspect could be excluded as the biter.
This is a major turning point in the investigation. Ed is not the one who left those bite marks on his wife. And then the final piece of evidence. The results of the saliva analysis come back from the lab. Now the investigation takes another dramatic turn.
The saliva was from a person who is a so-called secretor. And by that I mean they secrete blood factors in their saliva.
Shirley's murderer had B-type blood factors in his saliva. Only 6% of the population fit this profile, and Ed Andranowicz is not one of them. Ed's shoes don't match the print left on Shirley's body. There was no evidence Ed had transported her in his car. Ed's teeth don't match the bite marks on Shirley's body. And the killer has type B blood. Ed does not. After 56 days in jail, Ed is finally released. The police are baffled. If he didn't murder his wife, why did he confess to it?
Ed Andranowicz confessed to the crime because he genuinely believed that he may have committed the offense. He knew that he'd been having trouble with his wife. He knew he had been in a fight with her. He knew that she was dead. He had no explanation, so it's kind of like, who else but him could have done it?
It was a true whodunit murder case. It may have started out looking like a potential domestic assault, but in fact, that particular theory was proved to be wrong, and there was some person out there who admitted this horrible act and possibly may commit another similar offense.
It's now 2 months since the night Shirley Andranowicz was murdered. The police still have no suspect or any clue as to the identity of her killer.
I'm tired. Let's go.
Oh, I'm not tired. You go.
Said let's go.
And I said I don't want to go. I'm having fun.
Detectives still believe her murderer was in the bar that night, probably watching this scene. Could it have triggered the rage that climaxed in the savage rape and murder of Shirley Andranowicz? Now, 2 months later, the early advantage has been lost, and a psychopath is still at large. He could strike again at any time. Detectives now try to find if anyone else who was in the bar that night has type B blood to match the secretion in the bite marks on Shirley's body. Some samples are positive, but with no other evidence to point a definite finger at anyone, this is another blind alley.
Investigators become demoralized because you can't help but have empathy for this victim and the family.
Then police get the break they've been hoping for. Working on his test slabs, forensic geologist Richard Monroe has found a way to preserve and identify fingerprints left on concrete.
After a lot of trial and error, it was determined that cyanide superglue was the best fixing material to try to hold oils in your hands on the concrete surface.
Monroe now tries his test on the murder weapon. He flushes it with a chemical called Sudan black. Its particles get caught up in the fingerprint ridges fixed by the glue, making them visible.
When you watch the prints develop, it's like watching a flower bloom. It was a very personal moment. Left the lab, and I walked out to the major crime area to talk to detectives and found out I was the only one there. We'd gone home, so it was rather anticlimactic because you finally made a discovery that no one could tell.
After 3 months' work, Monroe does find fingerprints on the murder weapon, but they're too badly smudged to be of use.
It's a frantic event, so you get slippage, but at least you can tell how it's held, and that was the best we could get out of the situation based on what the crime scene gave us.
The blurry image can't bring the police any closer. The investigation once again hits a dead end. Then, on August 17th, a shocking piece of news. 16-year-old Bridget Grenier is found murdered less than 50 miles from Winnipeg. It happened in June, a month after the murder of Shirley Andranowicz. There are awful similarities between the two cases. Both women were beaten, raped, and bitten.
It's definitely someone that's on the dark side of life that committed this offense.
The man charged with Grenier's murder is one Kyle Unger. Intriguingly, the name Unger appears in Shirley Andranowicz's address book. Since most murderers are known to the victim, it gives police new hope and a new direction. The similarities between the two crimes are compelling. Police also find that Unger had been in Winnipeg around the time of Shirley's murder. Could the same man have killed both women? Detectives once again review all the available evidence to try and make the vital connection. But then, checking airline records, they discover that although Kyle Unger was in Winnipeg in May of 1990, he left the city a few days before the murder. He never returned. And the Unger and Shirley Andranowicz's address book is an uncle she hadn't seen in years. He is no relation to Kyle Unger. The two murders, though bizarrely similar, have nothing to do with each other. The case begins to crumble.
We were carrying on with the investigation. We were chasing down a number of leads. However, none of those leads bore any fruit, and the case was starting to grow a little bit cold.
Winnipeg police now ask Inspector Ron McKay of the RCMP Violent Crime Analysis Section to put together a profile of the killer.
The body was found in a totally exposed area, which makes it a very high-risk crime for the offender. Risk of interruption, risk of being seen. This was a highly impulsive crime and a highly opportunistic crime. When you have this kind of crime, typically the offender will live or work in the immediate area. And the demographics of the area suggest that the majority of residents, particularly male residents, in that area are Caucasian. The bite marks on the victim were motivated by a violent sexual fantasy that the offender has been carrying around in his brain for years. And the sexual behavior was suggestive of a youthful offender. And the choice of weapon certainly suggests that you have a very powerful, physically strong offender with a sustained high level of anger.
The profile was potentially very useful, but with no suspects, it was academic. As the months drag on, police need a real break if they are going to catch the killer. On the first anniversary of the murder, a TV report is broadcast to jog people's memories.
The early morning hours of Sunday, May 20th, 1990, Shirley Andranowicz's beaten body was found behind Grant Park High School. Even though the case is now more than a year old, police say the investigation still continues, though they don't expect anyone else to be charged.
Unsolved murder, the case is never closed. This investigation may be suspended to begin, and then when new information comes in, of course, automatically reopened.
And then, as a result of the broadcast, a totally unexpected break.
We got a telephone call from an individual who felt that he may have some information.
The tip-off comes from one Al Ryder. On the night of the murder, he and a friend, Mark Jarman, were also drinking at the Grant Hotel. No one knew them in the bar, so the police couldn't talk to them when they conducted their interviews a year ago.
Man, it's late. I'm checking out. See you back at the apartment.
Okay. See you later.
Ryder and Jarman were both staying with a friend nearby. The apartment overlooked the field behind Grant Park High School, the scene of the murder.
Hey, what's up?
When Ryder returns to the apartment, he finds Jarman visibly shaken.
What's up with you, Mark?
This guy. He tried to rob me.
What happened?
I fought him off. Hit him on the head with a cinder block. I killed him.
You killed him? You sure, man?
Yeah. I think so. What do I do with these, man?
Shh.
Jarman burnt the clothes, and Ryder didn't think much more about it, until he saw the report on Shirley's death a year later. When Ryder makes the call, Jarman is already in prison just outside Winnipeg serving time for burglary. Ryder's story gives police a new direction in this difficult case. Could this petty thief be the vicious murderer of Shirley Andranowicz? The first sign that the story could have some substance comes from the seemingly innocent grocery list Carrie Armitt found near the crime scene the day after the murder. It has 2 clear fingerprints on it. It turns out that the day before the murder, the mother of the friend with whom Jarman was staying asked him to get some groceries for her. She gave him $100. Jarman left her the change with the groceries. She was the owner of a cat. As Jarman is already in prison, his fingerprints are on file. Armitt compares them to the prints he found on the grocery list.
2 fingerprints on the grocery note were identified, one having been made by Mr. Jarman's left thumb and one by his left middle finger. There was enough detail to positively identify him as having made these fingerprints.
But Marshall knows that a print on a grocery list found in a busy public area won't tie Jarman to the murder, especially when the place he was staying was so near the crime scene. 20 hours after Ryder's phone call, the detectives go to interview Jarman in prison.
We tried to be as well armed as possible before going into an interview of this magnitude for a crime of this seriousness.
There's a lot riding on this interview. It's been over a year since the murder and the police haven't charged anyone yet. But for the first time in the investigation, Marshall and Oliver feel optimistic, and Jarman appears to want to talk.
And I met up with the woman. We got talking. She was looking for her shoe, she said. She'd lost her shoe.
One of the things that solidified the case for us was when he first began speaking with her, she had said that she was out looking for a shoe. And we knew we were on the right track at that time because there was a shoe found with the body and the matching shoe was found back at her house.
Tell us about it. We had sex. That was it. Then I got into a fight with this guy. He tried to rob me. We had a fight. That's how I got the blood on me. What about the woman? She just headed off in the other direction.
There was no other guy there, Mark.
Can I get some smokes?
Okay. Let's take a break. I'll be right back.
Could he really be the vicious killer they've been hunting for over a year?
You want me to solve this thing for you right now? The stuff about the guy. It's bullshit. I did it. Okay? I did it. Well, Detective, do I fit your profile? What's your profile say?
Jarman then gives them a full confession. He admits to having sex with Shirley Andranowicz, but insists it was consensual, saying he only killed her when she accused him of rape. He wasn't going to prison for rape.
Why did you bite her? I'm not sure why I did that.
It's a chilling response for such a savage attack.
The nipples themselves were never covered, and we asked him if he could help us out with that, and in quite an insulted fashion, he told us, well, I didn't keep them, or anything like that.
Marshall has already had one confession in this case. He's all too aware that without solid evidence, Jarman's story may not stand up in court. Mark Jarman has confessed to the murder of Shirley Andranowicz. The forensic team must now put together a solid case with which to convict him. David Sweet, the expert in legal dentistry, gets to work on the impressions of Jarman's teeth.
His teeth had spaces between them, and they tapered toward the biting edge. That kind of detail becomes important when we do the physical comparison of the teeth to the bite mark.
Though the first teeth marks he tries to match on Shirley's skin aren't clear enough, there are others which do provide an incriminating match.
The bite marks on the nipples had very little information because of the damage to the skin. So the primary area where this conclusion was presented to the courts was with the bite to the genital area. That way, I was able to identify the person that was responsible for the crime.
That is the best news the police could have hoped for. Mark Jarman finally stands trial for the murder of Shirley Andranowicz, but there are still surprises in store.
Mr. Andranowicz, why did you confess to killing your wife?
I could have killed her. I don't really remember.
You don't remember killing your wife?
I was drinking a lot then. We had a lot of bad fights. I might have, done it. Like by accident. I don't really know.
You don't know.
Though he's only a witness at Jarman's trial, Ed's battle with his inner demons makes him think he's the guilty party. Terry McKean was the Crown attorney prosecuting the case.
Well, it was a tough case because of the fact that the husband had already confessed to the murder, so throughout the whole course of the trial, I was busy not only showing that Jarman was the real killer, but I was busy defending the husband and showing that he wasn't the killer.
Jarman's conviction is sealed by the forensic evidence painstakingly gathered by the Winnipeg police. Jarman's teeth match the bite marks on Shirley's body. Jarman's blood type matches the blood secretions in the saliva left on Shirley's body. Jarman's fingerprints match the fingerprints found on the grocery list.
And in his statement to the police, Jarman said a number of things that only the real killer could know. So there were many things that identified him as the person that committed this unbelievably brutal murder.
After a 4-week trial, Mark Jarman is found guilty of murder. For the police involved in this case, the forensic evidence does more than convict Jarman. It also paints a clearer picture of what really happened that night behind Grant Park High School.
Violent nature of the whole attack. This just didn't sit well as far as being consensual.
This was a rape, without a doubt.
Jarman thought, rather than get arrested, charged, and locked up in jail as a rapist, I'd better kill her, basically save myself that trouble.
And there, in the parking lot, he found the perfect weapon to silence Shirley for good.
Years after having done this case, what sticks in my mind is the absolute brutality of this murder and sexual relation. It's unlike any other case I've ever done. I've done a few murder cases.
I found the Andranowicz case to be a hugely tragic case and extremely challenging, and that there were so many different parts of our training that we had to put to use.
With all the answers the evidence provided, there is one that may never be known. Why, even with the real killer on trial, did Ed Andranowicz still think he might have murdered his wife?
Perhaps it's, a way of salvaging a life that's going nowhere and get some redemption for something. Maybe he feels responsible for having her walking around in the middle of the night, and in that way he feels he killed her.
Las Vegas, Nevada. A millionaire casino boss is found dead. His girlfriend and her lover are charged with murder. Did she do it, or didn't she?
It was the most trying time I've ever had in my life.
It's a story that really has everything. I mean, sex, drugs, love, betrayal, buried treasure. And it's all in the backdrop of Las Vegas.
Was it suicide, an accidental overdose, or ruthless murder that took the life of a Las Vegas casino boss? Here's what happened. You decide. On September 17th, 1998, rescue workers respond to a frantic 911 call from the home of a Las Vegas legend.
Please send someone here. Please, can you do something? My husband, God. He's not breathing. I have to go. He needs me.
The 911 operator traces the call to 2408 Palomino Lane, a sprawling Las Vegas mansion. Inside, a grisly sight. Millionaire casino boss Ted Binion, dead. Crime scene investigator Mike Perkins was among the first at the scene.
Obviously, there was no blatant trauma to the body of Mr. Binion. There wasn't a gunshot wound to the head. His throat hadn't been slashed. There wasn't anything substantial like that. There were a few small injuries on his body. But we didn't have anything else specifically on him to go with.
I never should have left the house. I never should have let you be alone.
The woman who called 911 is not Ted Binion's wife. It's his girlfriend, 26-year-old Sandy Murphy. This is her first TV interview since being released after 4.5 years in a federal penitentiary.
Well, I came home, and I parked in the celly port. And I came in through the side door into the kitchen, and I said, "Teddy Ruxpin, I'm home." I used to call him Teddy Ruxpin because I had a teddy bear when I was a kid. He didn't answer. So I went to the den to get him, and he was resting, what appeared to be resting. And I tried to wake him up, and he wouldn't wake up. It was at that point I realized that he was in real trouble.
Sandy fears the worst. She calls 911, and when police arrive, she tells them her story. Ted Binion has had a destructive addiction to heroin for almost 2 decades. His favorite way of getting high is smoking it, called chasing the dragon. To help him come down, he used a prescription sedative called Xanax. Dr. Enrique Lacayo was Ted Binion's neighbor. He prescribed the sedative to Binion the day before he died.
I felt that it was medically necessary for him to have it, to help him to go through the withdrawal without having to go back to the drug. Heroin addicts, they have a tendency to crave it as soon as they get off the drug. So I felt by him having the Xanax, he would feel much better to fight the addiction again.
CSI Perkins finds an empty Xanax bottle and heroin paraphernalia. Everything about the scene suggests an addict on a deadly binge. Whether accident or suicide, police conclude that drugs killed Ted Binion. Case closed. There are many who believe Ted Binion had good reason to take his life. Binion's heroin addiction cost him control of Binion's Horseshoe Casino, a Las Vegas fixture since the early days of Sin City. Jeff Gurman is a Vegas journalist.
Well, I mean, anybody who wants to talk about the Binions has to start with Benny Binion. He's the patriarch of the family. He died in 1989. He is one of the pioneers of Las Vegas. He's an old-time gambler from Texas, ran illegal gambling operations in Dallas, and one of the most colorful figures this city has ever seen. He killed a few people in Dallas. He had to get out of Dallas, and ultimately ended up starting the Horseshoe Club, which became one of the most popular casinos of its time.
Benny turned the Horseshoe into Vegas's most popular poker joint. He promoted the now legendary World Series of Poker. When Benny died, Ted and the family took charge of the casino. But Ted's problem with heroin haunted him. In 1997, the Nevada Gaming Commission revoked his license. His final words to the commission revealed his despair.
This is my life. I have nowhere else to go.
All he has left is Sandy.
In the beginning, it was wonderful. I mean, I had started a new relationship, and he moved me into his home. And he had some troubles of his own with the gaming control board, and he was going through a divorce. So it was a little tough, but it was new, and we were in love, and we had a great time for, I would say, at least the first 12 months of our relationship. It was all bliss and everything that comes with love.
Thanks to those.
But the heroin was more powerful than love. John Mobbitt is a defense attorney in Vegas. He was a friend of Binion's.
He loved his heroin more than he loved her. And that's what stepped in between Sandy and Teddy. You know, people say, well, he's been taking heroin for years, so he knows what he's doing. That's a joke. That's ridiculous. He is addicted to heroin for 15, 20 years. And because of that, when you start taking it, you don't realize your limits. And then you start taking Xanax on top of it. You don't know where you're at.
CSI Mike Perkins concludes his investigation and finds nothing suspicious. The police are certain Ted Binion died of a drug overdose.
When we left the residence on September 17th, we had not formed any definitive conclusions on what had happened to Mr. Binion. We obviously didn't have any signs of a substantial struggle or of a violent death.
I'll call you when he's feeling better. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
New evidence will produce a different version of events. One that points to murder. One day after casino boss Ted Binion is found dead, an autopsy determines the cause of death. A textbook overdose. Famed pathologist Dr. Cyril Wecht has reviewed the autopsy report.
In my opinion, Ted Binion clearly, unquestionably died as a result of combined drug toxicity, heroin and Xanax, a touch of Valium, but it was the heroin and the Xanax. Keep in mind that both are central nervous system depressants. Heroin is a powerful analgesic, and Xanax a kind of a tranquilizer, and so on. Both work pharmacologically by depressing different parts of the brain. And in combination, they produce a situation which we call synergism, where 2 + 2 may equal 5 or 7, not just 4.
The body shows no signs of struggle. The pathologist notes a small red mark in the middle of Binion's chest and a mild abrasion on his upper lip. Neither points to foul play. Rigor mortis has set in, providing an approximate time of death around 12 noon or 4 hours before Sandy Murphy called 911. Vegas police officially close the case. But the Binion family believes Sandy Murphy murdered Ted Binion. They hire a private investigator to prove it. To this day, Sandy says the cards were stacked against her.
I think it's a very tough thing when you're up against a very powerful family who has a tremendous amount of political influence, and I was sort of the scapegoat.
The PI produces a new version of the facts. The story begins at a Las Vegas strip club when Teddy first laid eyes on Sandy, a 23-year-old California surfer girl. By most accounts, she danced topless for him, but to this day, Sandy Murphy says she was never a stripper.
Well, I was very young, and I was traveling at the time, and it was my first time to Nevada. I was quite excited, and I lost money gambling and had a girlfriend with me who was manufactured intimates, and we went to a gentleman's club. It's the first time I ever been to a gentleman's club. And we sold costumes, and that's how I met Teddy.
Whatever the truth is, Ted Binion saw Sandy Murphy and was entranced.
My Teddy Ruxpin. At first, I didn't really like him very much. He seemed sort of arrogant, and he was with a friend of his who I thought was rather interesting, and I didn't care for him in the beginning. But through several cocktails and hours later, he kind of won me over, and he was very silly and extremely witty and very intelligent. And I gave him my number, and he never stopped calling. I love you.
He divorced his wife of 25 years. Sandy moved in.
Teddy was the man who swept me off my feet. I thought he'd fill the hole in my heart. I thought he'd love and protect me forever.
Sandy was taken care of very well by Ted. He gave her a credit card with a $10,000 limit, which he paid off every month. She had access to all the cash she needed. They lived in a $1 million home, beautiful ranch-style home. He bought her a Mercedes sports coupe. They dined at expensive gourmet restaurants all the time. So it was a pretty good lifestyle for her.
But by 1998, the relationship between Ted and Sandy was no longer the loving, gentle partnership it had once been.
Well, I don't think anyone really knows what it's like to live with a drug addict. It's very difficult because it's like living with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. One day he would be the sweet, loving man that I know, and while at his highest moment, or at his lowest of lows where he was looking to get high again, he wasn't that man anymore.
Tom Loveday was Ted Binion's gardener for 15 years.
The only thing I didn't like about Ted, if he got stoned, or if he did his heroin, or if he got drunk, he got mean. And he got mean only with his women. And he beat up Sandy, because I used to see the bruises on Sandy. He'd call me in the house when I came that following Thursday and say, Tom, I did a bad thing last night, I beat up Sandy.
Teddy was the kind of guy who had this smile. No matter what he did or how angry you got at him, all he had to do was smile. I miss his face. I miss his voice. I miss his touch.
Always a paranoid man, Ted wires his house with cameras. He watches Sandy's every move, and he doesn't trust her. In this version of events, Sandy senses Ted is about to kick her out. She'll lose her car, her credit card, and the $1 million house which Ted has given her in his will. Some say Ted Binion was finished with Sandy Murphy.
Hey, my titty Ruxpin. What's wrong? You've been drinking again.
Oh, where the hell have you been?
Excuse me?
Where the hell have you been?
What business is it of yours?
Oh, darling, if it's none of my business, why don't you get the hell out of here?
Fine, I'm gone.
Is this motive for murder? The private investigator takes a fresh look at Sandy's behavior the day Ted Binion died. He re-examines the statement she gave police at the hospital.
My neighbor, he's a doctor, and he used to give us that stuff all the time when we were, and I told him not to give him that stuff again. He gave him some last night.
Sandy's story comes across as a too perfect performance.
God, you wake up.
CSI Mike Perkins doesn't buy it.
I've been in the last 20 years with several police departments, over 6,000, close to 6,300 crime scenes, and Miss Murphy's behavior that day struck me as fabricated. It was varying too much. She seemed to be able to turn it off at will.
Then there's the 911 call.
My husband. He's not breathing.
Binion has been dead for about 4 hours at the time of her call. It's a strange statement. Ted's not only stopped breathing, he's stone cold. Sandy Murphy is either a grief-stricken girlfriend or a gifted actor. Another strange fact. At 12 noon, a realtor working on a deal for Ted phones the house.
Hello?
Hi, Sandy, it's Barbara. Is Ted there?
No, Barbara, he's out of it.
What's wrong? Are you okay?
No. No one understands what it's like living with a drug addict. I've got this mess to clean up in the bathroom.
Do you want me to come over? I could do that right now.
No. He doesn't like people to see him like this.
Oh, we have an appointment tomorrow at 1 p.m.
Well, you better call to see if he can make that appointment.
Why don't you get me to come over there and we can go out to lunch and chat?
No. Every time I go out, he interrogates me.
Are you sure?
Look, Barbara, I have to go, okay? Goodbye.
Ted Binion is already dead or lies dying at this very moment. An hour later, Sandy goes out to run some errands. Either she didn't see Ted on her way out, or she had something to do with his death.
Well, I don't know that I remember all of my day, but I remember most of it only because I've told the story so many times before. And I remember specifically getting up at a certain point and feeding the dogs and having a chat about life and heroin and his life in hopes of having a life without heroin.
The day before he died, Ted Binion calls his lawyer with strict orders.
Yeah. Take Sandy out of the will. She doesn't kill me tonight. Yeah. If I'm dead, you'll know what happened. Yeah.
Is money enough of a motive for Sandy Murphy to kill Ted Binion? There's another shocking discovery. Sandy Murphy has a lover, and he too has a motive for murder. Six months before his death, Ted Binion meets 33-year-old entrepreneur Rick Tabish in a men's room.
Heard about this new guy hustling around Vegas. His name was Rick Tabish from Montana. I had a ranch in Montana. Hell, some of the best times of my life were in Montana. Anyway, Sandy and I were at the restaurant there having a couple of drinks and a steak. I excused myself to go to the John. Well, there's Rick Tabish. Said I heard about him. Asked him if he'd like to come out on the town with Sandy and me. Well, he was a little hesitant at first, but I said, "You don't know who I am, do you? My name is Ted Binion." He came.
We met in the can. We just hit it off. After a couple months, he consulted me about his problems, how he'd like to quit taking drugs. I started helping the guy out. Everybody's against him. I just took him for who he was. It was good.
Tabish owns a large trucking company. Binion asks Tabish for a bizarre favor. He enlists him to bury $5 million worth of rare silver coins. He directs Tabish to a vacant lot he owns in a small town outside Vegas. The paranoid casino boss explains that he doesn't want the coins falling into the wrong hands.
That said, you keep the combo. You're the silver guy. If I need anything, we'll both come out here. He said he didn't want his ex-wife getting her hands on that silver.
Tabish owes the IRS $300,000. He's hoping his new friend can help him with his money problems. And then there's Sandy.
One thing led to another, they became friends. Rick started doing work for Teddy. That's how they came about, and that's how Sandy met Rick. It was through Ted. And because of the abuse that she was undergoing and suffering in the household, because of the drug addiction, because of the alcohol, she turned to Rick. And that's understandable in a house where there's abuse. And then a person turns to a caregiver for assistance. And that's what happened here with Sandy.
I swear we only slept together twice. And we were pretty drunk. And we decided to break it off. Me married, 2 kids. Sandy with Ted. She was afraid of him. That he'd kill her if he ever found out. We thought we'd be together one day, but for now, just calling it quits.
I loved my man very much, and he was on heroin, and his love became heroin. And as a result, he had a friend who I trusted, who I confided in, and I took it a little too far on one occasion on September 13th. And because of that, I've been held accountable and to a standard that I don't think that any woman could live up to.
Rick is deep in debt and desperate. Sandy is abused, alone, and about to get kicked out of her $1 million home. Not to mention that Ted might shoot them if he knew about their affair. Did Rick and Sandy murder Ted Binion?
Ted was more valuable to them dead than alive. Sandy felt she would inherit the home and a certain amount of cash from Ted, and Tavish was basically trying to get at his wealth any way he could. And if Ted wasn't around, it would have been a lot easier.
Now it's up to forensic science to prove their guilt or innocence. Casino boss Ted Binion died of a massive drug overdose. But was it murder? Dr. Ellen Clark is a forensic pathologist in Reno, Nevada. She believes Ted Binion was murdered.
Mr. Binion had some paleness and distortion or bending of the tip of his nose toward the, I believe it was the right side of the front of his face. In addition to this, he had evidence of skin break injury or abrasion on the sides of his upper lip, immediately below his nose. The total patterning all suggested that the body had at one point been partially face down, and at the scene it was discovered face up, with these fixed changes suggesting that it remained face down for some time after death occurred, then had been rotated face up.
If Sandy and Rick did kill Ted Binion, how did they do it? How do you force an addict to smoke heroin? Famed forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht thinks the idea is preposterous.
Ted Binion bought the black tar. Ted Binion got the Xanax tablets from his next door neighbor. So you've got that short period of time. Think, so Sandy Murphy and Tavish, you know, I'm not making them out to be imbeciles, but you know, they're not medical people, they're not forensic scientists. They figure out, they conspire that, gee, he got the black tar and he got the Xanax, this is what we can do. In less than 2 days, they planned the whole thing. Think about that.
No matter. 2 days after Ted Binion's death, Rick Tavish is caught digging up the $5 million worth of silver he buried for the casino boss.
What are you doing out here? Oh, just cleaning up the place. Working nights, just get ahead of the job. You know,
What's in the truck?
Oh, nothing. See? Nothing in there.
Jimmy, come on up and have a look for me, will you?
Steel on the bottom here.
Uh-huh.
Pretty nice, isn't it?
Yeah, a little nippy. Out here digging holes in the middle of the night.
Oh, yeah. Gotta do that now and then to fill the holes in, you know, gravel taken out.
What do you got?
You better have a look at this.
There is something in the truck.
All right, I'm lying. I'm taking up the silver for Teddy Binion. I'm taking it to Las Vegas to put in a trust fund for Teddy's daughter for when she turns 35. Hey, I got nothing to
Talk
hide.
down sound, huh? Okay.
I see, officer, I've got nothing to hide.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't.
The cops don't buy it. He is arrested. Police find a briefcase containing information for selling antique coins. The case also contains a love letter from Sandy Murphy.
Hey, let's go over it again, Rick.
I mean, I'd have to be a complete fool to come out and load a trailer full of silver. I even called you guys and told you I was coming out. I didn't come out here to rip the guy off. I mean, I have a 1.5-year-old kid and a 3.5-year-old kid. You think I want to go to jail? Leave them without a daddy? I know it's hard for you to believe.
Rick is set free on bail. The state of Nevada reopens the Binion murder case. They're looking for new evidence to prove that Sandy Murphy and Rick Tabish killed the casino boss. Binion's gardener gives them what they're looking for.
When I arrived at Ted's house, it was approximately 9 o'clock in the morning because I had checked the clock on my dash. The first thing I noticed was Sandy's car parked on the side. Sandy never parks her car on the side. It's always parked either in a garage or in a circular driveway in the front of the house. So that seemed a little strange to me, but I didn't think too much of it. When I turned, I looked up, and that's when I noticed these curtains were closed. Those curtains were never supposed to be closed because Ted always told me those curtains have to be open because when he leaves his bedroom to walk into his den, he always wanted to see it in the backyard. I thought, well, this doesn't look right, so I decided to check the house.
Then Loveday notices something. A chair off the bathroom window. Did Ted kick Sandy out? And did she break in to kill him? Tom Loveday is certain. Sandy Murphy was in the house while he was in the yard, exactly when forensic science had determined Ted Binion's time of death. Was Rick in the house too? Rick Tabish and Ted Binion had become fast friends. But Rick couldn't take his eyes off Sandy.
I'm not perfect, by all means. I made my mistakes. Some of the greatest lessons in life are about hardship. You don't learn that until your hands are slapped.
They would go to posh Beverly Hills hotels and on weekends and rendezvous there and live it up all behind Ted's back. And so it's a relationship that kind of evolved the last, over time, maybe the last 4 months of Binion's life, and where it became really serious at about the time that he was, that he died.
Investigators seek evidence to prove that Rick Tabish was in the house when Ted Binion died. Their main clue is Sandy's car. Tom Loveday had never seen it parked clear of the drive.
I figured there was another car in her garage space. Because the other garage space, there was no way you could get in, because I'm parked in front of it. So who's ever in there cannot leave anyway.
Ted Binion stashed millions of dollars all over his house, but police find safes and hiding spots empty. Did Sandy keep the driveway clear while Rick stole millions in cash? Lawyer John Mommet says the theory is crazy.
Well, that's exactly correct, because you have a couple of things here. Number one, during the course of the trial, no one ever placed Sandy Murphy at the scene where the silver is being dug up. And at the trial, no one's ever placed Mr. Tabish in the house where Ted Binion's body was found that day. So we have a divergence of facts here that's putting the people in opposite ends of the spectrum.
Hi, Mary, it's Sandy.
But there is another strange fact.
I'm fine, thank you. You don't need to come in today. Ted isn't feeling very well. He was up all night, so was I, so we need to get some sleep, okay?
Sandy Murphy canceled the cleaning lady the morning Ted Binion
I'll
died.
call you when he's feeling better. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
But what about the gardener? Did smart Sandy simply forget to call him? Even if Rick Tabish was in the house, how could he kill Ted Binion? And can you get heroin in your stomach if you smoke it? Forensic scientist Ellen Clark says yes.
Certainly you can swallow heroin when you smoke it. It's going through the oral cavity, through the nasal cavity, so it may end up in the stomach. In Mr. Binion's case, the morphine, the alprazolam in particular, and even the benzodiazepine, Valium-like drugs were all present in toxic and published lethal levels.
Murder by deliberate overdose, a near-perfect crime.
I'm an overachiever. Should have listened to my father. He told me all the time, learn to walk before you learn to run, Rick. I never listened. Got in too deep.
But even if his life was being threatened, would Ted Binion deliberately overdose? Pathologist Cyril Wecht cannot envision the crime scene.
To my knowledge, nobody ever suggested that they had a gun pointed at his head. And even if you restrain his wrist, how do you get this stuff into him, including all of these Xanax tablets?
The only other piece of evidence is the chair outside the back window. Vegas CSI Mike Perkins revisited the crime scene and took a closer look at the chair.
We did fingerprint processing on the window, both inside and out, as well as the chair and the windowsill inside. We did recover several prints from those areas. At a later time, these prints became identified back to Sandra Murphy.
Did Sandy Murphy break into her own house to kill Ted Binion? It's a slim case, but Sandy Murphy and Rick Tabish are arrested for his murder.
Court documents just released point to Murphy and her alleged boyfriend Rick Tabish as the masterminds of a conspiracy to kill a casino executive and take his assets.
There isn't a week that goes by where we don't acquire more information. The investigation is not over with. We will continue to investigate even up until the time that the case goes to the jury.
It's up to the jury to find the truth in one of Las Vegas's murkiest murders.
This court is now in session.
1.5 years after the death of Ted Binion, the trial of Sandy Murphy and Rick Tabish begins.
Please be seated.
Mob attorney John Mommet defends Sandy Murphy as she and Tabish sit side by side and face a media frenzy.
This young lady is strong, and she's going to continue to fight until she's vindicated.
But a long trial is no excuse for an expert witness to break the rules, is it?
I do the best I can.
And the gentlemen of the jury will then be the ultimate determiners of reasonableness.
This is a case that really captivated Las Vegas. I mean, the first trial was shown live, gavel to gavel, on television. It was also covered live by Court TV.
In this case paints a clear picture of two people who killed a man.
It's just a case that fascinated everybody. It was this ultimate mystery. There was no smoking gun. There was a compelling circumstantial case, but no one could really say for sure how Ted Binion died, and I think that was part of what piqued everybody's interest.
Go ahead, Teddy.
The prosecution maintains that Binion's overdose was forced on him by Rick and Sandy.
Come on, pal. Pick it up. Pick it up. Go ahead.
Cyril Wecht testified for the defense.
Go again.
And he thinks the lovers didn't stand a chance.
I don't care what anybody says. When a jury is convened in a criminal case, especially a homicide case, those jurors, the overwhelming majority of them, will go in thinking, hey, this guy would not be here charged with murder if they did not have a case. Anytime you have adultery or cheating on the side, then that's going to be a major factor in the consideration of the jury, even though it does not directly have relevance and application of the true issues in the case.
Another forensic pathologist presents the jury with a new and radical theory.
I think they had one primary witness. His name was Dr. Michael Bodden.
Dr. Michael Bodden is a forensic superstar.
They didn't want to be influenced by outside opinions.
His theory makes a messy legal case even messier.
My opinion is he died of asphyxia by suffocation.
The process is known as burking, named after a famous Scottish serial killer who suffocated his victims by sitting on their chests.
Just keep pressing, keep blocking, keep blocking.
Why is he shaking?
Shh, that's okay, Daddy. I think he's done.
Some pathologists, including yourself, have described suffocation as perhaps the perfect crime.
I would not say perfect crime. It's the most difficult, among the most difficult diagnoses to make at autopsy.
Bodden says the mark on Binion's chest is from one of his shirt buttons. Bodden's expertise hits home with the jury. But there is another twist.
And the opinions that you reached in this case were opinions that you
Shell went on to portray Bodden as a gun for hire, pointing out he was initially hired by the Binion family, not the prosecution.
Opinions I reached were the opinions I reached the day before I testified in the preliminary hearing, and at that time, I had come out here at the request of the family, yes.
Then it is pathologist Cyril Wecht's turn. He totally disagrees with Bodden.
I just don't find a basis for such a diagnosis in this case. Take the morphine, and you take the Xanax, and you take the Valium, and you got 3 drugs that are depressing the brain, and you have a synergistic effect.
Wecht also asks, what on earth do Sandy and Rick know about burking?
Boy, if you sit on the chest and I'll cover the nose and I'll cover the mouth and we'll stop him from breathing and so on and so forth. And by the way, there was no evidence of strangulation and no marks on the neck or in the soft tissues beneath the skin in the neck and so on. Again, 99 out of 100 doctors don't know what burking is, and 95 out of 100 pathologists who don't do forensic pathology know what burking is, and 999,999 out of a million forensic pathologists had never used burking as a diagnosis. I'm still looking for the last case that was signed out as burking anywhere in the world.
Wecht says Ted's scraped lip is shaving burn, plain and simple.
My opinion that this case represented homicide was based upon the fact that the collective evidence, that is the physical evidence on the body, coupled with the investigative evidence, many inconsistencies at the scene and in the follow-up investigations, indicated that other people may have had a hand in Mr. Binyon's death.
In other words, Ellen thinks Rick and Sandy killed Ted. Wecht doesn't.
You're going to have 6, 8, 10 forensic scientists, as in the Binyon case, top people, forensic pathologists, toxicologists, etc. But these 12 jurors, most of whom who didn't go to college, most of whom never even saw a chemistry, physics lab, let alone looked under a microscope or saw a dead body and dissected it, but they will figure it out. They'll figure it out. It's ridiculous.
Less than 2 months after the trial began, the jurors return with their verdict.
We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant, Richard Bennett Tabish, as follows. Count 7, murder with use of a deadly weapon. Guilty of murder of the first degree. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant, Sandra Renee Murphy, as follows. Count 7, murder with use of a deadly weapon. Guilty of murder of the first degree.
I can remember, but I don't know that I could ever describe it. Because at the same time, I was disheartened to think that anybody who ever knew us as a couple would ever think that I would harm someone that I loved.
They each get 20 years. But there has been a major legal screw-up. One that will open up old wounds and set Sandy Murphy free. California surfer girl Sandy Murphy finds herself doing hard time, convicted of a murder she says she did not commit.
I went to prison for 4.5 years. The first 6 months I did in solitary confinement. I received a 30-minute phone call in the morning in a shower, escorted back to my cell, and a 30-minute phone call in a shower later on that evening, Monday through Friday, locked down Friday till Monday for my first 6 months. And then I was eventually sent to the Women's State Penitentiary in Nevada.
Not about passing or failing.
Alan Dershowitz is among the most famous defense lawyers in the world. He defends underdogs. And he believes Sandy Murphy and Rick Tabish were wrongfully convicted.
I love Teddy with all my heart, and I know he loved me just as much. I'm sorry for the day I walked out that door on September 17th and left him there alone. I'm sorry for not being there when he needed me the most.
I absolutely and unequivocally did not kill Ted Binyon. Digging up the silver was the worst decision of my life. I got sucked into Ted Binyon's world.
Dershowitz says the Binyon case is unique because prosecutors presented 2 forensic stories. Maybe Binyon was suffocated, or maybe he was forced to overdose. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, take Sandy out of the will. If she doesn't kill me tonight.
Then there's the testimony from Ted Binyon's lawyer. Total hearsay from a dead man.
Well, if I end up dead, you'll know what happened.
In October 2004, Sandy Murphy and Rick Tabish get a retrial and a second chance.
Well, I think that the truth spoke for itself in my second trial, and I was vindicated for all the right reasons, thanks to medical science. And I think that it was easy to pick out an indiscretion that sort of became the catalyst to my downfall. And ultimately it was rectified, and we are where we are today. But sure, my involvement with Rick Tabish was the catalyst. It was the beginning of the end. And I'm grateful for science, because that's what led me to where we are today and to my newfound freedom.
Mr. Tabish, Ms. Murphy, I'd like you to stand up and face the jury.
We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant, Richard Bennett Tabish, as follows. Count 1, conspiracy to commit murder and/or robbery. We find the defendant not guilty. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant, Sandra Renee Murphy, as follows. Count 1, conspiracy to commit murder and/or robbery. We find the defendant not guilty.
Everybody quiet down.
Both are found not guilty of murder, but guilty of stealing Ted Binion's money. Sandy Murphy is appealing that decision. Today, after 4.5 years of hard time, Sandy Murphy is free.
I feel relief that I have set the record straight, that I've been given a second chance.
Sandy Murphy is free, clear from the legal shadow of Ted Binion's death.
So even though at some points, every now and then, I feel a little resentful, I'm grateful at the same respect that they gave me a greater sense of self, and I was able to achieve what I did. And I don't know that I ever thought that I would be capable of fighting and surviving through all of this, knowing who I was at such a young age at Teddy's death, in comparison to the woman I am now.
Rick Tabish is up for parole in 2008. Did they do it? Unless one of them confesses, no one will ever know for sure.